Welcome back, everybody, to the Birds Blast with Kyle Quinn. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted because Kyle, this is it, man. The regular season is over, I know we're excited about the playoffs, and we should be. But Kyle, where is the time going, man?
Dude, it always goes by so fast. The thing I can't stand the most about the NFL, and I love everything about the NFL. It goes by in a flash, man. It really does. I mean, I guess it's the fact that there's a game. The games are once a week, so you kind of go through it week 1, week 2. You feel like you sit there and you go, wow, it's week 4 already. Wow, it's week 8 already. Wow, it's week 12 already. And then all of a sudden it's done. And you're like, oh, we're at the playoffs. It always goes by so quick.
But we should count ourselves lucky because we do live to fight another day, and that is this weekend in the wild card round, which we'll definitely get to here on this fun-filled episode of the Birds Blast. But Kyle, in order to go forward, we must look back because we do that every week, and I'm not going to spend too much time looking back because it really wasn't much to talk about. 20-13, Eagles victory over the Giants at the chilly Lincoln Financial Field, finishing the season 14-3, one of the better all-time winning seasons in Eagle franchise history. Tanner McKee, the hero of the day, and we're going to spend about 10 seconds on this. 27 for 41, 269 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Kyle, all due respect to Tanner McKee and his family, I need to see him in a little bit more than a preseason game before to make a kind of a judgment on his quarterback ability.
Yeah, sure. And I wouldn't make any grand projections about what he is or will be in the NFL in the future, but you do have to give him credit. He was, the Giants aren't really an NFL team, but by definition, technically they are. And the Giants weren't playing backups in that game. I mean, they were trying to get guys some work on the defensive side of the ball. So, you have to give Tanner a little bit of credit for playing on his side of the ball with third stringers, but against the Giants starters who, maybe would be third stringers on our team. But they are starters nonetheless. And I thought he put together a pretty solid performance, at the very least, not in a playoff situation, but if it came down to it this offseason and they got an offer for Kenny Pickett, you could at least feel a little bit more comfortable after having seen that if Tanner McKee needed to step in for a limited period of time. But we'll see. It was very limited action for him, both against the Cowboys and the Giants. But, I mean, look, he threw the football pretty well, and I thought he looked like he was in control of the offense, so that was good to see.
Now, Kyle, with that being said, if all was different right now and Jalen Hurts on the good side is back to practice, second straight day of practice, which to me says he's cleared concussion protocol. He's not on the injured report, so that's obviously a good news story. But if it was Tanner McKee instead of Jalen Hurts heading into this weekend against Green Bay, would you feel different about potential outcome against the Packers?
Yeah, I'd feel so much different. We'll get to my thoughts about this game as it is with Jalen Hurts playing. But, while I liked what I saw from Tanner McKee, he's still, at the end of the day, a third-string quarterback. He's a third on the depth chart for a reason. And this is the playoffs, man. This is an entirely different animal. We've seen starting quarterbacks sort of crumble under the pressure of a postseason game. And in these games where every possession, every play, every instance matters, that's not a situation that I'd feel comfortable throwing him into. So, yeah, I'd feel vastly different about this one.
So Eagles 14-3, season complete. Now we're moving on to play the Packers here on Sunday in the wild card round. But before we move forward, Kyle, I do want to head into the stat pack, the Birds Blast stat pack, season-ending edition. I'm going to give you the season numbers here. I'm not going to waste time with the Giants, but we're going to talk season stuff because this stuff to me is directly linked into what's going to happen going forward into the playoffs. In the red zone for the season, 39 for 67. They finished less than 60% efficient in the red zone. Kyle, we talked about it for 18 weeks, 17 weeks, whatever. We've been doing this for the season. And it's a stat that, we sit here and say every week, yeah, they got to clean up. They got to get better. They got to get better. But they don't seem to be doing it, Kyle. And we've run out of time now. Now it's the playoffs. They do have the ability to quick strike. They got the ability to score anywhere on the field. But when they do bog down in that 20-yard line and that red zone, they are somewhat of a different offense.
Yeah, I'm obviously that's a lot more important. Everything's enhanced when you're going up against playoff type competition. But like you said, you do have to sort of take solace in the fact that they have home run hitters, playmakers on the team. That's why they are 14-3, and that's nothing to sneeze at whatsoever. But do they need to be better in the red zone? Yeah, and I think as long as they're capitalizing on the opportunities, late in the game when those possessions really start to matter even more. They like you said, they really need to bear down and figure that out. There's one thing that needs to be a point of emphasis, I think, for the offensive coaching staff. It's how they perform in the red zone, especially in this game.
On the season, they scored 211 first half, about 12.4 points a game average. In the second half, 252 points, 14.8, which I thought, honestly, when this all bounced out, I was really kind of surprised that it was actually somewhat evened. There has been some point outbursts over the last few weeks that have kind of balanced this out a little bit, but and I resounded myself weeks ago, Kyle, to understand, yes, this team is not a fast starting football team, and so far so good. It hasn't really reared its ugly head, but let me tell you what, Kyle, I've gone to bed with better thoughts in my head heading into the playoffs with this team's inability to get off the fast starts.
Yeah, it's not something that you can ignore at all. And we've done this song and dance before with great Eagles teams where we're like, oh, well, it's a really minor thing that we think is bugging them or bites them sometimes, but it's no big deal. They're 14-3 or they're 13-4, and then all of a sudden it kills them. And like I always go back to how we talked about the special teams unit in 2022 when everything else on the team was humming. They were great, and we were like, well, it's funny that the only thing we have to complain about is the special teams. And then bang, in the most important game of the year, Kadarius Toney brings a back-breaking punt return, which, effectively put the Chiefs in position to win that game. So, like you said, it's not something that can be ignored heading into the postseason. They gotta, they definitely have to be a little bit better in the first quarter. It did seem to look like they might have captured something, at least in the beginning of the Steelers game, and then carried into the Washington game. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the offensive coordinator giving Jalen Hurts some easy completions in the beginning of the game. I think what you saw in the Steelers game and in the Washington game was them finally running those quick slants to AJ that I've been begging for all season long. Those are supposed to be easy completions, especially when you have AJ Brown. And I think that does, a few things. It helps the quarterback get into a rhythm. It's sort of like the basketball player that needs to see a shot go in just to sort of get them cooking. And then it also softens the defense up. So that we can abuse them with Saquon Barkley later in the game. So I think it works in multiple facets where they definitely need to design this offense so that in this game they get out to a fast start. And I think that starts with just giving Jalen Hurts those super easy completions.
Yeah, and as we said, the recipe has worked. It's not the optimal recipe, but it's worked partly or mainly due because of the defense and their ability to keep the Eagles kind of hanging around in games in the first half, and then Saquon Barkley just wears them down in the second half. But it's like living on the edge, Kyle. I don't feel comfortable, especially if we get deeper into this when we go up against very quick strike type offenses like perhaps Super Bowl Buffalo, Kansas City, teams like that, and even in our own conference with Detroit. It's to me not a really good place to live.
No, and I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I'm way more excited about the good parts of our team than I am worried about those things, but at the same time, you have to acknowledge that those are things that the Eagles need to be better at if they don't want them to end up biting them in those important games, like you said, against teams that'll make you pay for it.
Yeah. On the season, 97 penalties for 683 yards, 5.7 penalties for about 40 yards a game. In layman's terms, that's not a bad way to live. I'm okay with that. It's a little on the high side. What really concerns me about the penalties is those big ones, is those 15-yarders, those unsportsmanlike conduct, those emotional penalties that have been creeping up and biting the Eagles on the butt this season, more so than I can remember in the past.
Yes.
That's the coach's job to keep those tempers and emotions under wraps.
Yep.
He hasn't necessarily done a good job at that, but I would hope that this was an emphasis heading into the playoffs about that.
Well, and it should be, especially because I don't know if you saw this, but so apparently the NFL sent out a memo to every team basically saying that they're watching the penalties from, or the transgressions from like the emotional side of things, the personal foul things, what CJ Gardner-Johnson got ejected for. The league put out a memo that they are going to put an emphasis on those type of things. So if you're Nick Sirianni, it's very incumbent upon him to address this with the team heading into this game. It's like, this is not going to be tolerated. If you screw up, the referees will see it. They will penalize you for it. You could get ejected for it if you do it a few times. So I agree with you. That's entirely on Nick Sirianni to rein the team in that regard.
And I just don't want, because Kyle, this is like the playoffs for any sport is just the magical time of the year. And again, regardless of what sport you're talking about, baseball, during a regular 162 game baseball game, you're not standing up and hanging on every single pitch. But once the playoffs start, it's every pitch you're hanging on. It's the same thing in football, Kyle. Every possession, every play means something in the playoffs.
Yeah, every play, the between the plays, the penalties, stuff like that, everything. It's all magnified tenfold, including just like individual play of say like the quarterback or somebody blocking, making the right block, right? Like making sure you have all the right guys in the right position out there. Like you need everything that you bring into the playoffs needs to be the best version of itself.
It does. The Eagles ended up forcing 26 turnovers on the season, which averaged out to about 1.5 a game. And that number was drastically improved over the last 3 or 4 weeks, where they ended up turning the ball or forcing like 10 turnovers in 3 games, which you got to give them credit. I said it a couple weeks ago. I guess it's not how you start the season, it's how you finish. They desperately need to take that into the postseason.
Yeah, and they have, by all accounts, completely changed their identity on the defensive side of the ball from the first 4 weeks, when I think you saw them struggling with that a lot, to the last few weeks. And a lot of that comes down to, I think it started with the tackling. You saw a drastic change in how this Eagles team became more physical. They tackled, they swarmed the ball. But I think once you sort of lay that baseline down, then you can start going after the ball, right? You can lay your helmet on the ball, whether you put your helmet into the chest of the ball carrier, and sometimes that ends up knocking the ball out. You can throw a fist in there if you know that you have backup, right? You have other guys that will be able to clean up the tackle if you do go for that ball. Now they have to be smart about it, right? You can't afford to miss a tackle if you're one-on-one with a guy just because you're going with the ball. But by all accounts, a very welcome addition to this Eagles defense is that now they force turnovers. 1.5 a game over the course of a season is a great number.
It is. It absolutely is. As far as turnovers committed, 15, less than 1 a game. And that was definitely part of the game that was cleaned up dramatically since the bye. And Jalen Hurts, obviously the chief purveyor of most of our turnovers, that kind of went away for him for the basically 3/4 of the season.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, besides what I guess so, Saquon had a fumble. I know Cooper DeJean had a fumble on a special teams, but I don't recall ever seeing AJ Brown fumble, Devontae, Goddard. They played a very clean football game, offensive wise, at least when it comes to turnovers. And Jalen too. That's a credit to him, right? He's taking care of the ball now. It sort of works against you in some regards when you're being a little too conservative, or you're not taking shots one-on-one with guys like AJ, Devontae, who can win those one-on-ones. But it did end up bearing out to a 14-3 record. So you got to be happy with that.
Yeah. They allowed Jalen, Kenny Pickett, and Tanner McKee to get sacked 43 times for 263 yards, 2.5 a game, 15.4 yards a game. Kyle, I have nothing to say about this stat negatively at all. That's some great work by an all-pro unit there with that offensive line.
Yeah, it is. If there's one nitpicky thing that I would have about it, it is the fact that Jalen can tend to hold on to the football a little bit too long. I think and this is even more of a testament to the offensive line, I don't think some of those sacks were really their fault. If you do the ratio of time to pressure and time to throw, Hurts is bottom of the league. He holds on to the ball longer than I think any quarterback in the NFL. And I think for the sack numbers to still be that low is a massive testament to that offensive line.
Absolutely. As far as the defense and how they got to the opposing quarterback, 43 sacks for 280 yards. Again, 2.5 for 16.4 yards. They've actually same amount, of sacks they gave up. They got, but again, it's one of those numbers that have improved as we've moved through the season, so that you can kind of grab onto that.
Yeah, and not awful considering where that unit started this season. I remember there were times we got on here, maybe even through the first 4 weeks, we're like, is this unit ever going to be able to get pressure on a quarterback? And we had our doubts that they would, that they would even get close. I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that the secondary was locked down, right? So you see some coverage sacks mixed into there, the strength of the defense on the back end. So, if it works, it works. It's obviously resulted in a little bit of an influx of some sacks here and there. I think you saw Nolan Smith sort of come into his own a little bit this season. And Jalen Carter, of course, is just a game wrecker out the middle of the field. He makes life easier for everybody. So I think a marked improvement by the defensive line. Still, probably, numbers not exactly where you'd want them to be, but I would definitely say serviceable, especially when you factor in every other aspect of that defensive unit and how they play.
All-pro Jalen Carter, by the way.
That's right. Yep.
Congratulations to Jalen and Saquon for getting all-pro honors. Hell with the Pro Bowl. It's all about the all-pro. So, and on fourth down conversions or fourth down effectiveness, the Eagles went for it 28 astounding times on fourth down in 2024, and we're successful 19 times, 67%. Part of the game. It's been part of the game since actually I'll give Doug credit, man. Doug Peterson was, or maybe Chip. I'll give it to Doug. Doug kind of ushered in the fourth down. Let's go for it. But Nick Sirianni has taken it to another level here over the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that you gave Doug the credit for it, because I'm seeing a lot of people saying, oh, Dan Campbell, like such an innovator with how he gambles and stuff. I'm like, dude, this was Big Balls Doug before Dan Campbell. And the guy won a Super Bowl doing it with perhaps one of the biggest gambles in NFL history. So some much deserved credit for our guy Doug, who is currently jobless. Sorry, Doug.
Yeah, and rest in peace, Doug Peterson. I imagine not this season coming. I look for him in 2026. I wouldn't actually be surprised to see him trolling or patrolling a college football sideline at some point, maybe.
Man, I don't know what the future holds for old Dougie.
Maybe joining back with Andy Reid and his staff. If Spagnuolo gets a job, maybe he joins his staff. I don't know. We'll see. All that obviously that's it. That's the regular season stat pack. Eagles numbers by the book for the season. So yeah, Kyle, listen, 14-3. It's been an adventure throughout the season, but we're here and we've arrived at the playoffs. Eagles are the 2nd seed. The Packers are the 7th seed. 11-6 Packer team versus a 14-3 Eagle team. Before we get into this game Sunday, I want to remind everybody, in case you've forgotten, that yes, there was a game between these two teams 1,010 years ago in Brazil on week 1. Kyle, Quinn, is it smart to talk about anything from that game, or is this one of those cases where it's just, too much has passed since then?
So if you're Eagles coaches, it definitely behooves you to look at tape from that game. You're going to see some tendencies, things just from their coaching staff, right? What they like to, some looks that they like to give. You want to at least have that in your back pocket. For someone like you and I mean, well, we're going to talk about this in less X's and O's and more in layman's terms, is that these are two completely different teams, both of them, from the time that they played each other. I mean, this is a completely different Eagles team. The Eagles are much better than the team that was in Brazil in week 1. And I think the Packers are worse of a team than they were in Brazil in week 1. So I think the teams have sort of passed like 2 ships in the night, and the Eagles are in a much more advantageous position than they were in that game.
Just real quick to refresh everybody, the Eagles were 3 for 6 in the red zone in that game. They scored 17 first half and 17 second half points. He committed 7 penalties, 57 yards, turned the football over 3 times, forced 1 turnover, got to Jordan Love twice. Jalen Hurts also got sacked twice, and they were 1 for 1 on fourth down conversions. But you're right, Kyle, it's so much has changed, and this stat right here supports that 100%. Here is no, that wasn't the one. I'm sorry. I don't Jalen Hurts. There he is. Wrong graphic. Jalen Hurts, the stat line for week 1, 20 of 34 for 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 INTs, 1 fumble, 1 lost fumble, a turnover machine. First thing that grabs me right off the bat is he hasn't attempted 34 passes in a very long time, and I don't see him doing that again.
No, I don't either necessarily, but that's not to say that he won't have to. Like we said, this is the postseason, and teams are going to try and key in on what your strengths are. And I mean, if you're an opposing defense, then you're looking at that and saying, maybe that's a formula to beat the Eagles. Make Jalen Hurts throw the ball 34 times. So we'll see. I wouldn't totally discount that, but I mean, I don't even know if that stat line tells the whole story. He was worse than that. I mean, yeah. Regardless of the 2 interceptions, the fumble, he tried to give that ball away to Green Bay like 5 times. So that was a bad Hurts performance, man.
Yeah, it definitely started. Then that kind of got the stuff going with the next 3 games went. Yeah, we were painting a pretty bad picture by the time we got to the bye week, but things have definitely changed. And let's get into Sunday. All right, Lincoln Financial Field, 425. It does not get any better than that. The weather on Sunday in Philadelphia, 42 degrees, sunny. It's going to go down to 23, so the game will get dramatically cooler as we move through it. The Eagles will be sporting their traditional midnight green tops, white bottoms. The Packers going with the white tops and yellow bottoms as per the Gridiron database. And let's jump into the injury report, because this is obviously one of the big stories this week. As I mentioned, Jalen Hurts completely cleared. He's not even on the thing anymore, but there's a couple players that are going into this game, Kyle. I'm not going to run through them all, but I'm going to hit on a few of them. Yeah. The Kobe Dean is listed as a full participant, but he's dealing with an abdomen problem. It's kept him out of some time over the last few games. Kyle, is there something? He's had a remarkable season, Dean. Definitely a turnaround year for him. But the one problem with him has always been the injury issue. Is there's some issues here that we need to be keeping an eye on?
Well, it'll be something to watch, obviously, if, he re-aggravates it or something like that. But at least in terms of this week, I mean, they're doing padded practices at the link, and Nakobe was one of those guys. So they got him out there not only practicing but hitting. So the Eagles clearly seem to think that he's going to be a full go here and that it's not really going to be a worry for him.
A.J. Brown also dealing with that knee problem that he suffered against, I believe it was the Commanders a few weeks back. He was a limited participant yesterday, and I believe I don't even think he was out there today. Other than that, though, you got Kenny Pickett dealing with the ribs. Everyone's banged up, but everyone seems to be upright, and that's good for the Eagles. The Packers, not so much. Christian Watson, huge news. The wide receiver tore his ACL in a non-contact injury last week in the final game of the season. What a kick to the groin, Kyle.
Yeah, he's their number one deep threat. I mean, statistically, not by volume, but one of the better deep threats in football. I'm sure. I think he averages like over 20 yards per reception this season. And, that's a very high number, even considering the fact that he doesn't touch the ball nearly as often as a lot of the other guys. But, I mean, that's the one thing the Packers love to do. They love to push the ball down the field. Jordan Love loves taking those aggressive deep shots, and Christian Watson's their best deep threat. So massive loss.
Tordell Slayton, the defensive lineman, did not participate because of an ankle problem. Zane Anderson, concussion, the safety, did not participate. Jordan Love is also dealing with the right elbow contusion that forced him out of last week's game. He was limited. Malik Willis, their backup quarterback, is dealing with a thumb problem. He was limited. That's an interesting story to keep an eye on. Apparently, the Packers are dinged up on the quarterback position. Edgerrin Cooper, huge. He's got a nagging problem with the knee, but he's also sick, so he was limited. Quay Walker, the linebacker, limited with the ankle. Javon Bullard, the safety, limited with the ankle. Evan Williams, the safety, quad limited. Brenton Cox, their edge rusher, foot problem, limited. And I didn't even know this guy was on the damn Packers. Andre Dillard is with the Packers. Did you know this, Kyle Quinn?
About that? No, I mean, I guess I might have seen it when it happened, but I definitely didn't realize.
Well, he's dealing with a concussion, so he was limited. And Romeo Dubs was a full participant, but he's got a cold, I guess. He's got some illness. So I would say, Kyle, over holistically, that the Packers are heading into this game a little bit more on the dinged up side than the Eagles are.
Big time. And I mean, the one guy that isn't even on that injury report because he's on IR now is their number one corner, Jair Alexander, who's done for the season too. I mean, that's probably the biggest loss of all of them heading into this game.
Absolutely. But let's focus now on our biggest injury concern, which is the concussion of Jalen Hurts that he suffered against the Commanders. Kyle, last week, I got it. He wasn't going to play against the Giants. There was no scenario that would have worked that self out that he would have played. But Kyle, he didn't clear concussion protocol to this week. Do you think they tried to get him through the protocol or they held him back for this week? And the reason why I asked that is how severe is this concussion?
Well, so I don't know. I mean, I'm inclined to believe that, he did need to wait till this week to be clear because for the Eagles, look, you don't have incentive to play him in the Giants game, but you at least have incentive to get him practice reps. And if he's in whatever phase of the concussion protocol that he was in, then he's not able to go out there and join his teammates. So, I mean, those are valuable reps 2 weeks before knowing that you have a big postseason run coming up. So I think I would have to believe that he did not clear the concussion protocol, or otherwise I'd be saying that's malpractice to not have him out there.
Yeah. We got a comment from a guy named Big Al saying, "Who lost the bet with the mustache?"
That would be you, Al, because you have to look at it.
I'll be there. Okay.
It's gonna be cold.
Andre Dillard, never heard of him. Yeah, I wish that was true. Watson not spreading out the field is huge for Green Bay. Yeah, Al, we're going to break down in our matchup segment about why I think it's such a big deal for the Packers. Yeah. All right, Kyle, before we move on deeper, let's I forgot to bring this up and I had to go back. So we do the pick'ems here on this program every week. And I had the Giants, you had the Eagles. You finished the season 12-5. Congratulations. Not even close. I came in at a putrid 7-10, which honestly I'm pretty proud of. I was trending. I think I had 2 wins at one point. So, a little pat on the back there for pulling it together at the end. You had Tanner McKee, Kyle, as your game MVP. I'm going to give it to you. I think he was the game MVP. I had Malik Neighbors. Kyle, you successfully picked the game MVP. What was it, 8 times this year? Yeah, eight times to my 3. So
run right there.
Congratulations, man. I can't make this stuff up, Kyle Quinn. That's outstanding. But all right. Injury report, uniforms, weather. Now let's talk some football, Kyle Quinn. Heading into this game, we typically at this point in the show, I'd ask Kyle, with all that being considered, what do you think is going to happen on Sunday? But I'm not going to ask him that this week. I am going to ask him something different. I'm going to start this. We are going to take a Eagle offense versus the Packer defense, and I'm going to take one key matchup from that area, and we're going to what I think is the most key matchup of the game, and Kyle will do the same, and we'll kind of play this back and forth for a little bit. I'll start. Kyle, I honestly believe that my biggest Eagle offense versus Packer defense key matchup, it's got to be, in my estimation, it's going to have to be Jalen Hurts versus the Green Bay Packer binged up secondary. You mentioned earlier, is Jalen Hurts going to potentially have to put the ball up 34 times? Is the blueprint out there to how to stop the Eagles? The Commander showed you how to do it. You put 8 in the box and you do a base 0 or you do a cover 0. Are the Packers going to force Jalen Hurts to throw the football? I say they will. So my biggest matchup is going to be Jalen Hurts against that Packer secondary.
Yeah, they should. And I would even throw the Packers linebackers in with the secondary in that, right? Jalen Hurts is probably, we'll see what they want to do, if they're going to be cautious at all, which I don't think they should be with this concussion. But I think the RPO game is something the Packers are susceptible to. So that could be a big way for them to push the linebackers or, bring the linebackers forward, see if you can dump the ball over their heads. But I think the RPO game is going to be a big deal in this one. So that plus, just the Packers banged up secondary in general, that's huge. That's everything in this game.
Now, on the other side of the football, the Eagle defense versus the Packer offense, I like the Eagle linebackers versus the Packers tight ends, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, and also Josh Jacobs coming out of the backfield. Without Watson, I think Jordan Love is going to try to exploit the middle of the field passing-wise, kind of like what you're just saying about Jalen Hurts. I think the middle of the field is going to be a prime piece of real estate on Sunday in this football game, and I think that Nakobe Dean, banged up as he might be, and Zach Bond are going to have their hands full with the middle of that field.
Yeah, and LaFleur's going to have to find creative ways to push the ball down the field if they're not going to be able to do their explosive plays here. So that could be stuff in the middle. They could be trying to just get guys in space down there. So, those linebackers need to be ready to not only cover, but be able to make tackles if they do get beat.
And my X factor is something that we've been talking about, kind of. It's sort of there right below the surface. Jake Elliott. My X factor in this game is Jake Elliott. This, I hope, doesn't come down to it, but my confidence level in Jake Elliott is nowhere near where it should be heading into the playoffs, Kyle Quinn.
Yeah, and Elliott's probably he's the number one X factor. I'm probably not going to be able to give you one that's more of an X factor than Jake Elliott. I will throw you a different guy out there when I get to mine, but I'm totally with you. And I never felt more shaky about a postseason game than Jake.
So let's toss it over to you, Kyle. Give me your Eagle offense versus Packer defense matchup.
So I'm going to go with A.J. Brown versus whoever the hell is replacing Jair Alexander in this game. That's huge. I think the Packers are pretty sound defensively. They've been a pretty good unit. I don't know, top 5 this whole season, but without Jair Alexander, the number 1 cornerback, that needs to be a matchup that A.J. Brown is ready to exploit. I know he's dealing with the knee injury, but he should be able to line up and beat whoever the hell is going up against him. And then it's up to Jalen Hurts to find him. So A.J. Brown needs to have his way with whoever that scrub cornerback is that's going to be filling in for Jair.
I agree more than you think because of this stat right here. Jalen Hurts attempted 361 passes in 2024, but only 48 of them were to the middle of the field. Why? I agree with you. I think Jalen Hurts, using the recipe that he's used all season long, it's going to be down the sidelines, in the seam, 50-50 balls. And there's nobody better than A.J. Brown to do that with. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm pretty certain that the Packers are going to have to they're going to have to bring help. But that means someone's going to be one-on-one, and that might be Dallas Goedert. They also might be Devontae Smith.
Yep. They got plenty of weapons to exploit that if they do spend a lot of resources trying to cover A.J. Brown. All right, you want my defensive X factor here?
Let's do it. Yep.
I'm going to go with the Bulldog, Jalen Carter, up the middle against that weak Packers interior offensive line. Week one, now, if there's anything you take away from week one, is that Josh Jacobs had a pretty nice day.
Yep.
They opened up some pretty decent holes for him, and I don't think the Eagles were as good of a tackling team or even as good of a defensive team as a unit at that moment. But all of that stuff with that Packers run game is going to have to start with Jalen Carter. And not only that, but he's sort of where everything starts. He's the keystone for that defense. He makes things easier for the secondary, the linebackers, and the other edge guys. I want to see him dominate those matchups with the guard and the center there. So Jalen Carter, probably an easier one, but the best player on this defense. So he's got to go play that way.
You mentioned Jalen Carter, and it made me think of somebody who let's face it, Kyle, draft wise, we can go back and forth about Howie and drafting. It's one of my favorite topics, but Jordan Love really needs to keep Jordan Love needs to step out of the shadows, because Jalen Carter does dominate and garner a lot of attention. It's got to leave some options open for some other people. And Jordan Davis, to me, is probably a more important part of the Eagle defense interior wise this week than Jalen Carter.
In the run game. Yeah. I mean, he's the one that sort of anchors the whole thing. But I think what makes life easier for Jordan Davis is the fact that Jalen Carter, while not being as big as him, commands two guys on every single play. I mean, you can't one-on-one Jalen Carter or he is going to beat you. So I would say it's probably the combination of the two of them. I just tend to go with the better player in this.
I agree. Let's hear your X factor for the game, Kyle.
All right. So obviously I think Jake Elliott's the number one. I'll throw you a fun one though. How about CJ Gardner-Johnson? On the back end, one, not only just in his play, but he needs to keep his attitude in check, not get ejected from this freaking football game. But beyond that, he's probably the number one playmaker on this Eagles defense. He was in 2022. He was for the Lions in the limited time last season that he was there. And that was a key thing that this Eagles team missed. Last season, they didn't force any turnovers. He comes back. Guess what? All of a sudden, they're forcing turnovers left and right. CJ Gardner-Johnson's a huge part of that. And with how much Jordan Love likes to push the ball down the field, I need to see CJ Gardner-Johnson make him pay for that. CJ Gardner-Johnson on defense is the X factor for me.
All right. And with all that, the weather, the uniforms, the injury report, our matchup breakdown, Kyle Quinn, what is your winner, your score prediction, and your game MVP for Sunday?
All right. So I actually think that this comes, I guess, more of, well, I'd say it's a combination of two things. I don't think the Packers are very good right now. I will say the vibes for the Packers, to me, are very reminiscent of the 2023 Eagles and the way that season ended. You have guys kind of calling each other out in the locker room in the post-game press conferences, saying that, they need to have team meetings, have deep conversations. They're banged up. They just lost an awful game to an awful Chicago Bears team. So they're kind of limping in to this postseason. The Eagles are a much better team than the Green Bay Packers. So I think the Eagles are going to win this one. Don't know how comfortable it'll be in the game and how we feel it, but I do think they will end up winning this one 27-17. And I'll go with Saquon for the game MVP. He had a great day in week one against the Packers in Brazil, and I think he's going to be able to repeat that performance.
Okay, before I reveal my pick, my score, and my MVP, what are your three keys to Eagle victory? We went out of order. I forgot about that, so let's backtrack.
We touched on some of these just a little bit, but I'll give you the three most important ones for me. First of all, I don't care if Jalen Hurts is coming off a concussion. I want to see them run RPOs. It's the bread and butter of this offense. The Packers love to play zone defense. It's probably the best thing that the Eagles have offensively that can match up against a zone defense by a team that plays the zone pretty well. So it's going to make life easier for Saquon. It's going to make life easier for Jalen in the passing game. I want to see them do the RPOs. Number two is, even without Christian Watson, they're going to try and dial up ways to get explosive plays down the field. I think the Packers are the number one team in explosive plays, both in the run game and the passing game this season. So that's going to include Josh Jacobs, going to include Jaden Reed. The Eagles need to be sound defensively. And I think why it's a key matchup is because Vic Fangio is the number one defensive coordinator when it comes to limiting explosive plays. I need to see that go down on Sunday against Green Bay. And that's probably the most important thing if I wanted to say which one was the most important. But other than that, and I touched on this a little bit too, is that I want to see Jalen Carter go and wreck this game. this is like he's probably going to be an all-pro player. He's going to be one of the best defensive tackles in football for the foreseeable future. And this is where his bread's got to be buttered. This is where his money's got to be made. I remember that Super Bowl run a few years ago with Aaron Donald and the Rams, where he just took over games. He took over the Super Bowl. He was the key to those Rams defenses winning. So I want to see Jalen Carter do the same thing. It's time for him to grow into that role, wreck this game, make life hell for Jordan Love. Maybe hit him a couple times. And again, he's another guy that I would have to say, do not get ejected, please, Jalen Carter. But I need to see Jalen Carter wreak some havoc up in the middle there.
My 3 keys to Eagle victory, pretty much the same as kind of what you're saying, and basically what I've said all season. Fast start. Listen, they've gotten better as we come down the stretch here. They got themselves 2 opening drive on the season. They scored last week in the first quarter. They scored on their opening drive. Now 2 on the season, or 2 opening drive touchdowns now on the season. And those 2 came relatively back to back from each other. And I'm going to hold on to that. 8 first quarter touchdowns now for the season, as that number drastically improved as we move down the stretch. Let's continue that. No more. We got to get some points in the first quarter. You got to get touchdowns in the first quarter, because you don't know what you're going to come up against offensively. So fast start. They've shown they can do it. They need to continue to build on it. Listen, you're right. Get inside Jordan. Don't give Jordan Love any opportunities to check down. Listen, he's got limited weapons back there. Make him feel the pain there. Put him on the ground. He's banged up. Bang him up some more. Pressure Jordan Love. Keep him running for his life. And then for the Eagles, I'm not a big fan of it, but keep cooking with the same recipe with Saquon Barkley. It's worked up to this point. Put yourself in a position to keep cooking with the recipe.
Yeah, I mean, and if I had to add a fourth one of mine, it's probably what you said. That the fast start in the first quarter. Another thing we can go back to in that game was the Eagles started terribly in the first quarter. Probably one of their worst first quarter starts this entire season, and the defense was able to keep them in it. Right, they held the Packers to 2 field goals on those 2 drives. We gave them short fields. While I trust the defense to be able to do that, it's not a guarantee. So I'd love to see the Eagles trying, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, is get those easy completions over the middle of the field, get the quarterback into a rhythm, and then that opens things up for everybody else on the offense. Absolutely.
Hello, Barbara. How are you this afternoon? Good to see you. And now I get to reveal my game score, my game MVP, and my winner. Kyle, I'm going to go with Green Bay 27-24. Still not a believer, and I'm even less a believer now that Jalen Hurts has been out of action for over 3.5 weeks. He hasn't been a world beater up to this point, and I think I don't know. I think this is where the magic stops. I really do. And I also believe that we are majority of Eagle fans that I've heard are so overestimating the Eagles and underestimating the Packers this week. I get it. The Packers are not that good of a team, but they come into this game with the 5th overall offense and the 5th overall defense. They also come into this game with a little bit more battle tested than the Eagles are this season. The Eagles have only faced 2 top 10 defenses all year and 1 top 5. Packers, 5 top 10 and 3 top 5. So they're a little bit more battle tested, to my opinion. In my opinion,
there's zero chance the Packers are more battle tested than the Eagles.
I'm just saying. I'm telling you what my opinion is, man.
The Packers have lost like every good team that they played this year.
I didn't say they won. I said they're battle tested.
Well, right? Okay, but who's more battle tested? The team that actually goes and performs well against good teams, or the team that doesn't?
We're going to go against good teams where the Eagles' cumulative opponent record is 20 games under 500.
I mean, have much better strength of victory than the Packers do. That's a fact.
In
fact, they beat the Packers head to head.
Yeah, well, no, but we already stated that. It's like 1,000 years ago. Hurts is doing individual drills in practice. He's not cleared for contact and remains in concussion protocol, but he's definitely playing on Sunday. I just don't understand this whole situation. Kyle, can you enlighten Barber? Because I didn't hear that. I thought he was cleared. He's not on the injury report.
Well, he's so technically, I think, through phase 4 and getting towards phase 5. I think 5 is what he can pass through today. I think 4 is like where he is able to go practice, and then 5 is, I guess, sort of monitoring whether or not the symptoms reappear in the practice. So I wouldn't worry about that. It's pretty certain to me that he's going to play.
There you have it, Barbara. And I also believe Jordan Love will be your game MVP, Kyle Quinn.
What am I going to do with you, Matt? What am I going to do?
know. I mean, you're 12-5. I was freaking 7-10. So
yep,
I'm in my own bed, swimming in my own ocean, Kyle. But before I let you go, Kyle Quinn, I do want to bring this up. We got some really good matchups this weekend in pro football. Actually, we got a great matchup in college football tonight. Penn State, Notre Dame, go Lions. Kyle, out of these games that you see before you, give me what's Kyle Quinn watching other than the Eagles?
Well, everything, because I'm a football junkie. But I will say the most intriguing matchup to me is going to be Washington versus the Bucs on Monday night. I'm curious to see if Jaden Daniels is just going to be your typical rookie quarterback going on the road. And, they don't usually perform very well unless you're Jordan Love against the Cowboys last season. But in fairness, everyone beats the Cowboys in the postseason. So, maybe not the biggest deal. But we'll see if Jaden Daniels is able to sort of keep that momentum going and face off against the Bucs team, who's, can be a tough team in the first round of the postseason. They're a little bit of a dark horse there. But I think that's the one that I'm going to be most interested to see. I think overall of all of the games this weekend, that's going to be the best matchup.
And then Barbara also states, that's a good point. The wildfires raging in Los Angeles. I wonder how that definitely affects SoFi and what the NFL is going to do with that game Monday night.
Yeah, they're talking about moving that one to Arizona. So
that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's not just the fires; it's that smoke in the air that you got to be concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for the Rams, is that they don't get home fans in their stadium anyway.
No, it's true.
So it's probably going to be a Vikings crowd no matter where they play.
Yeah, they could probably. Yeah, all right. For me, Kyle, I like the Bronco-Bill game, not because I anticipate a upset, but because I anticipate Bo Nix stamping his arrival in the NFL in the national spotlight. I mean, the Broncos don't play often on national TV. I mean, I know everybody gets their shot, but I think in this venue, in Orchard Park, in January, I don't think they win, but I think Bo Nix definitely stamps his arrival in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, look, I guess it's a matter of we're both intrigued by the rookie quarterbacks going up against a playoff team for the first time, or a team in the playoffs for the first time. So that'll be interesting. We'll see. And the AFC matchups don't really do much for me this week. I think the Ravens are going to kick the Steelers' ass. The Chargers and Texans is just kind of meh. And then I think the Bills are going to handle business against the Broncos too. So.
And the last part of our show before I let Kyle go, actually, before I let him go, I want to give a programming note out there to everybody. If the Eagles win, because we're in the playoffs now, if the Eagles win on Sunday, then we will be back next week to break this game down and look ahead at the divisional round. But if they do not, we will not return until the Thursday after the Super Bowl, when we'll kind of tie it all up and start looking ahead at 2025. So let's hope that we can keep this thing. We are week to week, just like everybody else in the NFL right now, folks. So we've got to keep this thing going. As far as the question of the week, Kyle Quinn, here you go. I held on hope and faith and confidence that when the Eagles came out of the tunnel to start the Giants game, that Saquon Barkley would run out in uniform and go for the record. The Eagles did not let him do it. He did not. He let it go. He let the record go. The Eagles put all their eggs in the Super Bowl basket. Is it a mistake, Kyle Quinn?
Well, yeah. I mean, I like you really wanted to see Saquon Barkley go for the record. I'm disappointed more than I would say it's a mistake. I don't necessarily think it affected one way or the other what happens in the postseason here in regards to how Saquon plays, how anybody else plays. Obviously, I think it was disappointing for players in the moment, but I think what they've done a really good job of this year is not losing focus and staying the course. And I think they know how important that these playoff games are. And, I think even more so now that they aren't going for that record, that they all sort of said, hey, look, this is what we're focusing on, so they better go focus on it.
I agree. No, actually, I don't agree. I think it's terrible. I think they should have let him go for the record. I think that this is a bad look, especially if they don't win the Super Bowl. If they win the Super Bowl, all's forgiven. No one's going to probably even think about this again. But if they don't, can you imagine the storyline the day after? I mean, it's going to be part of it. It's going to be part of how they wasted an opportunity, or they wasted an opportunity for Saquon Barkley to etch his name, and more importantly, the Eagles' name into the record books.
Yeah, and so I don't disagree with that. I think there's the bet has been made for, if they don't win the Super Bowl, then Eagles fans will have the right to look back on the season as somewhat of a failure. I mean, they didn't get the number one seed. They didn't go for the rushing record, history. And then they don't win the Super Bowl. I mean, what do you have after that? I'm with you there.
14-3.
I agree that it's disappointing and it would be a failure. I don't think it necessarily affects one way or the other how the Eagles come out in this game.
All right, Kyle. Listen, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for the season. Our fifth together doing this on various different platforms under various different names. But this is our fifth season done in the books. Now this is I think our fourth playoff run. together. So hopefully we're on at least till mid-February, and I'll see you next week. Oh, before I let you go, where can we find you?
Yeah, so on WIP, 94.1 on your dial, 10 to 2 every Monday through Friday. I'm producer for Joe and Hugh, and then on Twitter at Kyle_Quinn WIP.
All right, brother. We'll talk next week, man. Hopefully.
Man, talk to your miserable self next week, bud.
All right, Kyle Quinn. Why do I always get? Why can I not speak my mind without suffering the wrath of people? I don't think they're going to win. I think they lose 27-24. I think that it's going to be a really good game. I think people are underestimating the Packers too much and overestimating the Eagles too much. Jalen Hurts has not thrown a football in 3.5 weeks. Jalen Hurts is still allegedly dealing with a concussion. I just think there's a lot more chips stacked against the Eagles than most people do. And I like the Packers to kind of pull this out. Now, would I be surprised if the Eagles won? Absolutely not. That's why I'm predicting a 3-point win. Also, the X factor of Jake Elliott. How much is that really going to cause an issue on Sunday against the Packers? So I just think there's too much working for the Eagles against them. I do. And that's my story, and I'm sticking with it, man. None of the other guys that rushed for 2K got a Super Bowl in that year. One did. No, actually, you know what? You might be right. Did Terrell Davis, was his a 2,000-yard season? It was. Barbara, he rushed for 2,008 yards in 1998. So one person on the all-time list has a Super Bowl. One out of about 15 of them. So that's a good point. But all right. Listen, folks. Before I say goodbye, I do want to. Oh, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate that. It's about time someone recognizes. You know, Barbara, I do appreciate the respect, but honestly, I love the fight. It keeps me warm at night. It keeps me young. Never fight, never surrender. Always speak your mind, regardless of how you might feel. My dad taught me that when I was just a little kid. So, all right, before I let you guys go, I do want to review and recap my picks. I want to give you my playoff picks for the rest of the games this weekend. And let's start with Week 18, one of the hardest weeks, if not the hardest week of the season to pick. I was 8-8 in Week 18, which I'll take. Finishing the season at a 165-104 record in pick'ems. I'll take 165 and 104. I'll take it. I would like to get it less than 100, but you know what? I can't be beggars can't be choosers. So 165 and 104 for the season. On the wild card weekend, as I said, I like the Packers over the Eagles. I also like the Chargers over the Texans. I like Tampa over Washington. Buffalo will beat Denver, but I think that Denver game, something special is going to happen in that game, but I think Buffalo wins. Baltimore will beat Pittsburgh, and Minnesota will beat the Rams, regardless of where they play. So there's my picks for the weekend as well. And a special announcement, a little bit of personal news. I will be I'll be going on the road in February. I am on my way down. I'll be going down to Alabama, where I will be living for the next 6 weeks. I've been given an opportunity to umpire Division I college baseball in the SEC. So you'll be seeing me if you have ESPN Plus. Tune in. I don't know exactly what teams I'll be working with, but I'm going to be given an opportunity this winter, February through April. I'll be down in Alabama working Division I baseball and doing some SEC work as well. So looking forward to that. Super excited, super humbled and grateful for the opportunity. I'll also be working some perfect game stuff down there as well. So looking forward to working in the SEC. Looking forward to tangling with some of the big boys. God help me. Thank you, Barbara. And please, tune in. I'll tweet out if there's any games that I'm playing or working that are on. So anyway, that's going to do it. That's our playoff edition of the Birds Blast. As I said, programming note for this show right here. If the Eagles win, we will be back next week to break this game down and look at the divisional round. If the Eagles do not win, we until the day after the Super Bowl, when we will kind of wrap it all up, put a bow on the season, talk about 2025, talk about the draft a little bit, and get things rolling into the offseason. So here's hoping we're back next week, because I ultimately want the Eagles to win. But for all you football fans, you don't have to wait but a couple more hours for this one. This is going to be the big one tonight. Penn State, Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. Penn State with an opportunity to get to the national championship. Going to fight, battle the Fighting Irish for that opportunity. Texas and Ohio State, I believe, are Saturday in the other semifinal, or they're tomorrow around there. So big game tonight. And on this program, a big day. You're watching the Birds Blast, but immediately following the Birds Blast at around 8:30 tonight, I will be back with the final word with Matty B, our final episode of the broadcasting week. And then after me tonight, Flyer post game, Sal has you breaking down the Flyers and Stars for the Clear the Ice program. So big night here, or big day on the network. Cannot wait. Busy day. So thank you. You too, Barbara. It is cold. All right, folks, that is going to do it for me. I want to thank Kyle Quinn once again for another great season, our 5th together doing this type of show. So it's been a blast. Here's to 5 more years of working together doing these types of shows. And good luck to the Eagles on Sunday as we got ourselves some playoff football. Eagles, Packers, 4:30 on Sunday. Until we talk again in a couple hours when I'm back for the final word, I'll see you. Stay warm, as Barbara has said. It's cold out there, so we'll talk again soon.